So ek het nog gevra dat jy vrae deurstuur vir ons volgende gas, professor Francois Venter. Hy is die adjunk-uitvoerende direkteur by Wits Instituut vir Reproduktiewe Gesondheid en HIV. Net sê dis 'n Engelse Francois Venter. Voor iemand sê, maar hoe praat jy met die professor Engels? Good morning, Prof.
Hi everybody, I'm afraid so.
And it is like really Afrikaans Francois Venter, but you're an English one. Just a little bit of your background.
So I'm a professor of medicine at Wits. I grew up in the platteland and made my way to Wits, never left. So that's the problem around Afrikaans.
Oh, that's perfect. So the big thing, I think the big new news about COVID at the end of last week, the whole question about it's been airborne now. We thought it's just dropping, and I did some tests, and there's an interesting article about it, Network 24, where they tested, open plan office and also a restaurant and then a bus. And I think it's a big concern in South Africa with the taxis, but I mean, people need to get to work. You can't walk to work. So just more info about the virus being airborne now, and we thought it's just dropping fast.
So I think it is important. And it does, I think for the public, the main message is exactly the same, is that indoors is very dangerous, especially when you don't have airflow. And if you are indoors, opening the windows, opening the doors, getting some fans, make sure that your air conditioning is sort of pushing the air outside, not just recirculating. We actually have known about this transmission. I think the data that's come out in the last week just makes it that much more concerning. It's particularly concerning in healthcare facilities because it does mean that the masks there are going to have to be of a higher quality. But the basic message for the public is just do everything you can outdoors. I think your comment about the taxis is completely correct. But that actually has been a concern since the beginning, is that overcrowded public transport is going to pose a massive risk to people contracting the virus.
And it's so interesting for me, and it's going to sound stupid, but that's why we talk to the experts. For me, the moment someone says airflow, open the windows, now it's winter, it feels for me it can travel more. Or is it just like, the wind's blowing it away? So just to explain why there must be more open spaces or not a closed office.
So it's about dose. You need a certain dose of the virus to actually get it. And one of the most effective ways of diluting the dose is simply to get airflow. So you just essentially dilute it up. This thing is hanging there in the air. If you let the windows and a fan go, you can actually render a room, even if there's somebody in the room with COVID, coughing all over the place, within minutes, you can completely have that room back to normal. The other thing we know is that sunlight is a good sterilizer. So between those two things, those are probably your two most effective weapons to make places safe. I think the things that, and I think, again, everyone can relate to what you're saying about opening windows when it's winter. I just think that the world's going to have to start thinking about that more, is that increasingly we just have to dress more warmly when we want to go to places which are crowded indoors. And that includes shopping malls, it includes public transport, it includes gyms, places like that. We just have to start promoting a culture and start engineering our buildings in such a way that the air moves through it in a more in a safer way than we have traditionally.
Yeah, I'm sitting here in a studio with no window, so we really just one person in the studio and have to clean everything. So, but that explains it on an amazing way for me. So, for me, the other thing, people are very skeptical, but we can't be, because it's such a new virus. Like the moment it came out to say now it's airborne, people will go like, oh, but now tomorrow it's not going to be anymore. But I don't think people understand. That science on this only started a couple of months ago, not even a year, because it's you guys must work so fast and under immense pressure to try to understand this virus. So how many scientists, like even with the airborne, it was like 230 something scientists that says, listen, and it's from Oxford, we did the study. So people really have to trust science in this.
So I think you also need to trust that this virus is 7 months old, and there has been such a massive amount of information released to try and digest it. I think every scientist's brain is sore from just having to take so much information. And I think the public needs to understand. So I worked mainly in HIV, And it took us years and years and years to completely understand how it was transmitted, how it was, what forms it took, what things made it worse, how it manifested. This thing is a baby infant, practically straight out of the womb in terms of our scientific understanding of it. We've understood a lot, though. The one good thing we have is that the two previous SARS-type outbreaks we had, we learned a lot from Asia and from the Middle East when these happened. So we were able to extrapolate very quickly. But still, there are things we're learning. And I think people often see debates about this being a vascular disease versus a respiratory disease and stuff like that. A lot of that is just that this virus seems to affect the immune system and the body in a way that is quite characteristic, that's different from what we've experienced in the past. So I'm afraid the publisher's going to have to be a little bit patient while we try and make sense of this mess at the moment. And we will make sense, and we've already learned a huge amount. But it's this thing about the airborne spread, it doesn't diminish, what we knew about it, which is, open the windows, open the doors, get the air flowing.
And it's interesting. I think the biggest fear and the reality of this thing is you don't know what's going to happen to you. There's people, we just spoke about the lady that's like 29 years old on a ventilator, and then you get someone that's that you think it's like 89 and then surviving it. So, and I think maybe that's why we need to be so careful, because you don't know what your body's going to do.
Yeah, I think for all of us, this is like a terrible angst that we're still trying to internalize. I think it's weird about the human way they look at risk, because people don't think about flu like this, and flu is not nearly as dangerous as this virus is. But even with flu, a 29-year-old can end up on the ventilator, an 89-year-old can shrug it off. I think our perceptions of the risk are real in the sense that we are worried about it. But I think that also our acknowledgement that we are all at risk needs to also acknowledge the fact that there's certain people are much more at risk. And as you say, it's that 89-year-old who we should be really worrying about. I think for me, I'm 50, I'm healthy. The chances are I'm going to get it, I'm going to get sore throat, and I'm going to be fine. The problem is when I go next door to my neighbors who are elderly and pass it on, that's where the problem is. And I think that's what people need to be thinking more coherently about, is how do I keep people in my family, in my workplace, in my friendship circle, as safe as possible when they've got diabetes, they're older, they're HIV positive, they're on chemotherapy, all those things. Those are the people we need to be supporting.
I've got some questions from our viewers, but before we get there, I think we'll get there just after 7 o'clock news. The vaccine and the testing, we spoke to some people that's busy with that. You guys are very involved with it. Where are we standing, and can people still, say, I volunteer to be tested for a vaccine?
So yes, I actually enrolled on Friday. I think it's really important for people who that is not seen as a vaccine put on poor people. We're all in this together. We desperately need volunteers. I would just suggest people Google the vaccines in South Africa and find the sites and things like that. They are the ones coming on. They are the ones which are recruiting at the moment in both Cape Town and Johannesburg that I'm aware of. There's about 120 potential vaccines coming. And not all of them are going to make it to human trials, but there's several that are already there. And people, and let's just hope one of them works. We have to have many horses in this race in terms of the vaccines. Not all of them are going to work potentially. So we need to find the best one, the safest one. And then we need to have the discussion about who's going to get it first, because it may be that, that you can already see the Americans are like grabbing drugs and talking about, Americans first. We need to think about, as South Africans, what do we do about manufacturing capabilities, as well as what happens if we don't get it enough for everybody? Who are we going to prioritize? And again, I think that's not that difficult a discussion. Again, it's going to be about diabetics, older people, people who are just vulnerable and their immune systems are weak.
Here's a question. I'm going to translate it. It says, how long does it take for you to show symptoms when you were in contact with this virus? And it's also difficult because some people's got no symptoms.
We think probably about half of all people don't have symptoms. I suspect what actually happens, you have a bit of a sore throat or a bit of a cough and stuff like most of us do. It's winter, you can't just shrug it off. And that's how most of us are going to, probably half of us are going to experience it. Some others are going to have a very high temperature and a cough and everything else. So the average time from exposure to actually getting symptoms is 5 to 6 days. It can take longer, and for a few people a bit shorter, but in my head, that's how I remember it. It's just 5 or 6 days. Then about 2 weeks to getting really sick, and 3 weeks to death. Those are all averages. People take it in a much shorter time. Some people take it over a much longer time. But just conceptually for your viewers, just that's been useful for me to think about it like that.
Prof, I've got some questions from our viewers and listeners, so we'll catch up with you after the 7 o'clock news. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Great. Ek wil ons leer, ek leer baie. Al dink ons weet iets van hierdie virus af en ek bedoel wat 'n maandag. Ons gesels vanoggend met professor Francois Venter. Hy is adjunk uitvoerende direkteur by Wits Instituut vir Reproduktiewe Gesondheid en die MIV. Ons leer baie vanoggend nog steeds van hierdie virus. Al sien ek mense sê ek wil niks meer hoor nie. So good morning, Prof.
How's it?
Like, people are a bit fed up, but that's what you said. It's 7 months old. We need to face this thing. I've got one question, and then I've got a couple of questions from our viewers. For me, is the hope to be like New Zealand in terms of how to wipe this thing. And it feels impossible. There's people that saying it's going to stay with us for the next 2 years. I can't see it going away in a divided and especially socially a difficult country in South Africa, and we millions more. We're not just 5 million people in New Zealand, and it's much easier. How long is this thing going to be here?
So we hope it disappears. Some viruses do, but I must say this class of viruses tend to circulate. In fact, this coronavirus class, lots of us get it every single year. Just, we kind of shrug it off. It just manifests as a little bit of flu. So the possibilities that it disappears, and that's kind of wishful thinking to my mind. I think the most likely scenario is it's going to continue to circulate like the flu every season, maybe during the winter, maybe twice a year, maybe every 3 or 4 years. We just don't know yet. As I said, it's this frustrating place where we just haven't got all the information that we need. So the thing about New Zealand that is really difficult is that, at which stage do they open their borders? And it's all very well being a first world, island nation like Iceland and New Zealand. The rest of the world isn't like that, So we are going.
No, it's
sorry, my mute button. Everybody is going to go to New Zealand is going to be is going to have to be quarantined before they go in until we have a test that is absolutely rock solid in terms of telling them that they don't have COVID. And as we discussed earlier, about half the people don't have symptoms. So half the people walking through the border, with COVID are actually not going to, you're not going to know that they're there. And the tests we have are not perfect. So somebody's going to get through eventually, unless you quarantine everyone strictly for 14 days, possibly a little less, we'll see soon. Every time they enter through, they fly in or they come in by boat. So I don't see how places like New Zealand that are sustainable. I think they're kind of holding out for the vaccine. That's only if we're successful. It's not a given that we have lots of other viruses like HIV. We've been waiting for a vaccine for 30, 40 years. So it's not a given that we're going to have a vaccine there. And then, like you say, we have to learn to live with this virus, I suspect, particularly in South Africa.
Yeah. Waiting for that cure. The biggest question, the one I get the most, is can you get it twice? Can you get it again? And I don't think we know yet.
That's right. We don't. And again, I completely identify with the public's frustration on this. It's like, why can't you guys work this out? Again, it's been 7 months. We have, like, the vast majority of the world haven't had it once, not just twice, but once. So, in South Africa, it's sweeping its way through. The places where we could have seen it, that people go twice, they've been so successful in terms of their lockdown, and it's actually less lockdown than simply their social distancing and their masks and, just tracking cases very aggressively. So we have very, very few case reports of people who have got it twice. I must say, with every passing day, I think we're getting a little bit more comfortable that this probably gives you at least some form of immunity. But again, the frustration is I don't know whether the immunity this year is going to translate into next year. It's like flu. Every year there's a different strain that comes out that's slightly mutated, and you have to get a different vaccine each time. So we still don't know that. Is this going to start behaving like flu, and every year we're going to have another surge of infections? Or do you get it once and you never get it again, which is what we're all praying for, I think.
And then there's no such thing as a stupid question. Someone asked, they say that heat kills it, like sunlight and stuff like that. But why does it flourish with body temperature that's high? It's probably just a medical explanation.
I think the easy way for your public to understand is just that you have to have a human cell to manufacture it. This virus no viruses can make themselves. It's not like a bacteria that can grow on your, on your cheese. And so these things need to have human cells at preferably at a decent temperature. The virus itself is very, very fragile. And I think it's not like there are some viruses which are tough as nails, but this one is a wisp virus. It just has to see sunlight for a few minutes. It just has to be dispersed a little bit by air, and it just needs soap and water, and it dies. So people are so focused on these tough chemicals which really cause harm. What they should be doing is just soap and water on your hands is such a useful and quick intervention.
And then ek weet nie wat's bloedverdunners in Engels nie, blood thinners. I don't know. So someone's asking, it's Yaku Engelbrecht, is asking, is he more in danger because he uses it on a daily basis, probably heart problems?
We don't know. I would be more worried about your heart problems and say, that doesn't sound, those sort of long-term chronic illnesses, serious ones like diabetes and heart problems and cancer and stuff like that. Those are the reasons why you must try your best not to get COVID. And the people around you should be protecting you. So when somebody goes to a party and comes back, who's young, that person needs to be aware that the person they're putting in danger is not themselves. It's the father or the son with the chronic disease at home. So I think, I think that's the way people need to be thinking about it. How do we protect people?
And then we've got 20 seconds. And someone says, I can't smell or taste in the past 2 days. That's like one of the first symptoms.
It's not the commonest symptom, but it's a very characteristic symptom. So yes, that might be.
Go for a test.
Or just isolate yourself. The problem with the test, if it comes back positive, it's often not positive. So I would just isolate. And if you're fine, you're going to be fine. I think many of us are quite obvious if you're getting it at this stage.
Yes. Prof, we're out of time, but there's so many questions, so maybe we're going to get you back sometime and to answer some of these questions, and it helps a lot. So thank you for what you guys are doing, trying to make our lives easier so we can understand this virus. Have a great week.
Take care, everybody.
Cheers.